and it's more of who do I need to become as a person to be able to handle this next phase of growth.
Victoria, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We have been kind of playing phone tag for a while, so finally both of our schedules calmed down and we're finally able to sit down and chat.
Yeah, I'm excited about this because it's felt like we've been dancing around each other for a while.
Yeah, and we met through Monday Girl, and then you guys came to SF for work, which I would actually love to talk about, like what that experience was like coming to SF, how you guys set everything up. Like maybe I guess we could just start there and talk about sort of like what your goals were around the work trip and how you guys set those, and then how you set everything up for success, and then sort of like what the metrics were for measuring success.
Yeah, absolutely. So my company, Mave and Chez, we're a luxury ergonomic slipper brand. So we've created a slipper that's designed for women's bodies with the help of podiatrists. So they're actually really good for our bodies, unlike most of the stuff out there.
That's nice.
Yeah. And, building a company like ours does require a lot of capital, especially because we have our eyes set on building this into, an 8-figure, 9-figure business. So we're Canadian based. We're based in Toronto, Canada. And, the investor world is amazing here, but we definitely knew that like SF is the place to be, especially to meet investors. Not just for like the current raise that we're doing, but for future raises as we grow the company. So we really wanted to establish ourselves in the US, start to meet investors there. So we found out about this awesome program called Pathway to Silicon Valley, and it's actually created for female Canadian entrepreneurs to come to SF and meet investors.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah. So it's a 3-day program. It's run by this woman. Her name is Joanne. Her company is called Canadian Women's Network. So they do a bunch of programming. And she's originally from Canada and has spent like the last 30 years in SF. Has noticed a big gap and disparity really just for like female founders getting access to capital.
Yeah.
There's a crazy stat out there that like only 2.9% of venture capital goes to female entrepreneurs.
I heard it was 2, so you probably maybe that's better. I don't know.
I'm like cautiously optimistic always, so maybe I bumped it up a little bit. But so any opportunity we can get to be in front of investors is like a no-brainer for us.
So this is a cool program. So it's 3 days. Did you guys get set up with investors through this group, or did you guys have to make those connections yourselves?
Yeah, they actually did. It was like 3 days of workshops and programming. And then we had 2 of the sessions were roundtables with investors, which was fantastic. So we actually got to have some like one-to-one conversations with investors. And usually they're short. Usually they're like 10, 15 minutes, but it at least gets you having a conversation with them to like continue hopefully afterwards. So yeah.
And was part of that refining your pitch, like going over all that stuff as well?
Yeah. So a big part of just getting investment in general is just being great at your pitch, knowing what kind of questions they're going to ask, being prepared for all of that, and really having your ducks in a row and being confident. So the program definitely helped with our confidence, and also speaking to American investors because they are quite different from Canadian.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Canadians in general are a little more risk averse, especially in the investment world. So they're asking a lot of risk related questions. This is obviously a big generalization, but American investors, their approach is completely different. Like we found that they were a lot more interested in getting to know myself and my co-founder, Danny Kagan, as like people.
Yeah.
Not just about our business, which we really appreciated. It was like very refreshing.
I've heard about that. I think like I was just talking to somebody the other day and they're saying that investors are really like more interested, I guess Americans are more interested in understanding who you are because I think a lot of investors I've noticed are taking a more mentorship approach as opposed to just like money. And so I think that they're asking those kinds of personal questions to get to know you as a person because I think they're like, if I think that this person has what it takes to succeed as a founder, meaning like you're open minded in terms of when you can pivot or shift, or like someone who's quick on their feet, who's thoughtful and mindful about like making smart decisions. Honesty, I think, is a big trait that they look for because it's like, okay, if you have all of those things as a foundation of a person, you can weather any sort of storm or like ride any sort of wave, which I think almost lends itself to a better long term investment, which I just think is like a very interesting thing. Like, I think about this in relation to like Outdoor Voices. You know, that story is crazy for those who are listening if they don't know. Um, the founder of Outdoor Voices eventually got pushed out by the other board members. And I think that's like such an intense fear, you
Yeah.
know, is that if
Yeah.
you scale and then you get pushed out, like that's the worst case scenario because it's your baby, you've built it from the ground up. And then the idea of not being able to be a part of that anymore. And then, you know, through that, they went bankrupt and then just they recently got bought out again. So I think that stories like that and among others, investors are now starting to pay attention more to who you are as a person, like not just what your business is, right? Because I think it could iterate, it could change, but you as a person are the core and the foundation of it all.
Yeah, you're spot on. And my co-founder Danny and I, we've been entrepreneurs for over a decade now. This is
Mm,
our third business together. And so much of like building that successful business and investors that we're looking for, it's like that match of understanding that we have the same mindset,
mm,
that we're resilient, that we're gonna do whatever it takes to figure out how to keep going,
yeah.
and that we're not going to give up so easily. So yeah, it was very refreshing. We had a great time in SF. I like rose colored minus the fog. The fog is like a whole thing that I
Yeah.
just don't think people get until you go and you're like, I get it now.
No, like it's so weird because right now it's sunny, but
Yeah.
I woke up this morning and it was just like I was like, is it gonna rain today? Like the fog is just so intense and it's really like a huge thing and people think, oh, it's California, it must be really nice weather, and it's like cold.
Yeah, it's cold. I was like, oh my gosh, people need slippers here. SF is a perfect market for us. It's
No,
cold.
no, we really do. I wear slippers every day. Like
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
guys had a pop-up as well while you were here. How did that go?
Yeah. So, the strategy we've kind of used to grow, we're only 14 months in market. So,
Wow.
but before building Mave and Chez, we had built two other businesses. So, one tried and true strategy we always use whenever we're going to new places or places that, we don't have a presence in yet is like what I did with you, Maddie, is, reaching out to these communities online that we're a part of and be trying to be a part of as many like women, especially because we're all really more about supporting one another,
Yeah.
especially as entrepreneurs. And
Yeah.
so we just started with, reaching out to people we knew in SF, posting up on community sites. And eventually we just got, so many great connections, or, someone would be like, oh, I know somebody
Yeah.
that does so and so. And eventually we got connected to a woman who has a kimono shop in SF.
Wait, what's it called?
It's called Kim and Ono.
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh my
There's
God, these kimonos are insane. Her shop's in Chinatown. It
okay,
is
cool.
like, especially paired with our slippers, we were like,
Yeah,
this is the place. So it was awesome. We did a pop up
that's so
there.
cool.
It was really fun. Got to meet so many people. And then the other pop up we did was again through like one of the communities we're a part of. Um, she has like a fancy nail salon on Hay
Ooh.
Street
Oh,
called
nice.
Archer Nails.
Yeah.
Um, and so we did a pop up there. It was
Yeah, I
great.
think hey, I could see like Hayes makes sense a lot for your guys' demographic and stuff. Like the other stores that are in that area, I think made sense. Or like Fillmore, I would say is the other one that I think I could see you guys having like a pop-up store at. Um, but man, the communities are like such a life hack. That is something that I'm really discovering is like joining as many female groups as possible. Like there's an SF women's community, and those are just like the best networks to tap for literally anything. Like even for the podcast, I had like a lull in guests for a hot minute, and I just was like looking for inspo, and I was just kind of tired of like the continuous ones that I was getting.
Yeah.
Reached out to Monday Girl. I got so many responses. It was totally like not what I was expecting at all. And through that, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's true. Women love supporting other women, and in any way, shape, or form, like even if it's not in a direct capacity, we want to like reach you out to other people that could help or something like that. And that's something that I'm discovering as I get older is that women groups are just like the best networks to tap for anything that you're doing. It's so helpful.
100%. I feel like when you're first starting out in this journey of doing your own thing or creating your side hustle or being an entrepreneur, you feel like you have to do everything and
Mm-hmm.
that you have to figure everything out yourself, and it can be very like isolating and lonely. And there there truly is a power in being like, I am not good at all of the things, and it's nice to
Yes.
have support and be able to ask people for help. Like that's a nice thing, and I want that and I need that. So, you know, my co-founder Danny and I, we are like asking people questions, messaging people like every single day. And like
Yeah.
the first thing I do when I'm like, oh, I need to hire someone, or oh, I wonder what people think about this, is I literally go to groups like that and I like group source answers.
That's genius. And then even,
And
like even after all these years, I would say that you probably have a ton of experience to share with everyone else. But like to hear that you guys are still actively reaching out every single day, even at this stage, I just think it's entrepreneurialism is such a crazy journey because it's like no matter how many times or how long you're in it, you still are trying to figure something out every single day. It doesn't matter what scale you're at, like you will always have questions, which I don't know
yeah,
if that's comforting or terrifying at the same time.
yeah, I think you just have to be hungry for growth because you'll learn a whole bunch of things, and those things got you to this point, and then you
Yeah.
kind of have to like let those things go because they're not going to get you to the next point. Like you have to learn a
Yeah.
whole new set of skills. And I constantly feel that, like especially in the last few months. We just like I said, we've only launched a year ago and have done some really like big things in our past year. So now I'm focused on getting us to that next stage of growth, and I really have to like work on shedding like a lot of the things I did to
Mm.
get me here, because they're not going to serve me or help me to get to that like next destination.
Yeah. I would love to dig into that a little bit. Like maybe you could just talk a little bit about what your experience has been like, with launch, what the lessons you learned were, what you're now having to unlearn in order to scale to the next level. Because I think these are really important questions that I'm sure a lot of people deal with that would value from your insight.
Yeah, I felt such like a steep learning curve, like getting from like the ideas we had of like creating this like function first ergonomic slipper that would actually help women to actually launching it.
Yeah,
Um, I felt like that learning curve is so steep
totally.
because the two businesses my co-founder and I did before this, we were event planners. So we were very
Okay.
like service based, had built businesses before, but like completely different when you have to create a product from scratch. Um, and I actually built out a course for this because I was like so passionate about helping other women entrepreneurs just like make a little few less mistakes.
Yes. Oh my
So
God.
so, I mean, in that course, I talk about like product market fit, idea validation, how to like actually find if your market is there, analyzing your competitors, and then, the big part, which we don't talk about enough, how to raise money, how to prove
Yes.
the concept, Kickstarter campaigns, which we did, accessing grants and loans, which I'm sure there's a lot in the US, but I can speak to Canada. There's a ton, especially for female entrepreneurs. And then like that third bucket is really like building your brand, your why, your vision, your mission, all of these things. So like there's a skill set that comes with like figuring all of that out.
Yeah.
And I think in really that idea to launch phase, it's like you're hustling, you're grinding, you're doing like 90% of the work yourself, just like trying to figure it out. And then once you launch and you're in market, like it's impossible to do it all on your own.
Yeah.
Like you really have to like keep your ego in check. And now my co-founder and I are managing a team of about 7 people. Like the skills that I've had to evolve over the last, even 6 to 8 months are radically different from the ones that helped me get to launching.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, you're going to have to send me the link to this course so I can include it in the show notes, because that is everything. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you made that, because it's honestly like the reason I also started this podcast was because nobody talks about that step from 0 to 1, where you have this cool idea, but then how you actually take it to market. And then really, I guess that's only like step 0.5. And then the other 0.5 to 1 is like market to generating like enough sales to then start thinking about what comes next, like that. But I guess it's like building the boat to ensuring that the boat floats is like
Yes. Yeah.
the most critical stage, and I think is the one that is the least talked about and the least like, I think that's just the most critical deep dive that you can get, because that's where like the most important factors are. Did you guys you mentioned a little bit about a Kickstarter campaign. Did you guys what was your strategy? Were you thinking bootstrapping first, or you were like, we're gonna do a little Kickstarter and then try to raise capital? What was that experience for you?
Yeah, so when we were developing, once we started researching and being like, okay, we really do want to create a slipper. Like this is something we're passionate about. Women, especially, we created them during the pandemic too. So we were all spending so much time at home, and no one's wearing proper footwear indoors, which you really have to. Like our bodies aren't designed to be able to withstand like laminate hardwood tile floors. Like our bodies are designed to walk on like sand and dirt and gravel and all these things that are made to support our bodies. So like regardless of age, you should be wearing something supportive, whether it's like a supportive slipper or a Birkenstock or like something that gives you that arch support is really
cool.
key. Sidebar, but yeah, so as we were creating our prototypes, we were like, wow, we need like money to be able to make this. And we had each put in a bit of our own money. Like we like I said, we had built another company. We're still kind of doing things with that. So we were just like, okay, like let's pull a little money and of our own and invest it in. So we started there. And as we were developing, like we had never created a shoe before. Neither of us have fashion backgrounds, nothing related to creating footwear. So like the first person we really needed to help us was like a footwear technician.
Yeah.
It was somebody who's made like thousands of shoes. And that was like a very expensive person for us to bring on board. So
was that as like a consultative, like a consultant level? Okay.
Yeah. Like consulting us on like, these are the features. We told them like the vision we had, these are the features, and like helping us work with a factory and actually create that something out of thin air,
Yeah.
All of this costs a lot of money, and we had no education about how to raise money or that even there was a possibility.
Yeah.
But we knew we needed capital. So when we started to do our own research, we're like, Kickstarter made a lot of sense to us, like doing a Kickstarter campaign, because not only does it allow you to like get money from like, potential customers, kind of acts like as pre-orders for your inventory, but it kind of proves the concept as well.
Totally.
Which I think is a really important thing for people to be mindful of in this idea to launch stage, because we can think we have the best ideas in the world. But if other people don't think that it's needed in the world,
Right.
like, it might not be worth all of the energy and effort you're putting in. So you really want to have those opportunities to prove the concept, and that like people will actually pay money for what you want to create.
Yeah. And not to mention, like, if you launch without having proof of concept, you've spent a buttload of money on inventory and product that nobody wants. You're then like, that's a huge problem.
Yeah. So for us, like the thought of going from like creating the product to just launching a website just like logically didn't make sense,
Mm-hmm.
because what we had created then didn't really exist on the market yet. So we were like, we need to make sure there's a market for this
Yeah.
before, like, we love it, we want this, but does everybody else? And you can't assume, because I know many entrepreneurs, like there's a lot of stories out there of people just being so passionate about what they do, and that's amazing. But that, like, there is that part where you have to keep your ego in check and be like,
Yeah.
is this something the market really needs? Do I stand out against my competitors? All of these questions you have to ask yourself constantly.
So when you were doing the Kickstarter campaign, you mentioned that website was not in the cards yet. So were you posting on social media at the time, like explaining what the idea was, explaining what was happening, and then funneling people to Kickstarter to join the campaign?
Yeah, so a great book I would recommend if you're thinking about doing a Kickstarter campaign. It's a book called Crowdfunded by Mark Pacoda. I'll send you the info, Maddie, so you have it for the show notes. But that was like my Bible when we were creating our Kickstarter campaign. And one of the things he talks about, he like runs a Kickstarter agency. Like, it's a big thing now. There's like agencies that will help you do things. We weren't into that. We were like, we want to do it ourselves.
Yeah, like trying to save money.
Yeah. But one of the biggest things he says is to at least have like a landing page.
Okay.
Right, with like high level details, like don't have to do anything too crazy, but at least a landing page to capture people's emails, and start to build an email list, so that when you do launch your Kickstarter campaign, you have like an audience of people that are already interested and will buy from you.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the biggest things with Kickstarter, is you can't just rely on like the organic traffic from just like clicking launch on a Kickstarter campaign. You really do have to do the work for like 3 to 6 months to build up an audience through an email list, through social media, through press if you can get it. But we did all of those things.
Yeah. So was the point of the Kickstarter campaign to get you guys set up for like launch number 1?
Yeah. The point of the Kickstarter campaign was to really see if people would put money down for our product, like give us enough money to order our first batch of inventory.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, proving the concept was the biggest thing for us. And then on the side of that, like while we were launching our Kickstarter campaign, we were figuring out how to raise money and how we wanted to do that. And that's like a whole other bag of tricks that you need to figure out that no one really tells you how to do. You just kind of have to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, because then I'm thinking about it like, okay, so now we have like launch 1, we have proof of concept, we have customers who like say that they want it. So in order to scale to the next level, you got to get like the next round of funding, which then means you have the ability to reach out to either like VCs, angels. But I'm so curious to understand what it's been like from a product perspective, because I've heard so many horror stories about funding, particularly in D2C products, that I'm like, it must have been terrifying. What was your strategy? What was your experience like?
Yeah, it is scary. It's scary to ask people for money, and it's like, it's a skill. It really is. It's a muscle you need to learn how to flex. So for us, we were like building this Kickstarter campaign, had really good momentum. I think by the end of it, we ended up, hitting like a 50K, getting about 350 pre-orders. Like, that's like solid. Like, that's like enough to be like, there's something here, investors. So, for us, thankfully we weren't starting from zero. We had
Yeah.
built two companies before. Like I've said, like a dozen times talking to you, like community has always been an important ingredient for us. And the first thing we did, honestly, was started talking to our mentors, started
Mm.
talking to other successful entrepreneurs, being like, hey, this is our business. This is our business model. Like, how do we raise money for it?
Yeah.
And we had a lot of great people giving us advice. Like one of the first things we did was got a proper lawyer. Like it sounds
Mhm.
like a lot of money, but you need to make sure you have a structured shareholders agreement. You need to learn what a safe is, which is what we did our raise on, a simple agreement for future equity.
Okay.
So like you need to know what a safe is. You need to like learn that and understand it. You need to build a pitch deck,
Yep.
which sounds really cute, but we're probably on version 127
Oh
by
God.
now.
Like it's just a constant iterative process with the
It
pitch. Like
is.
it's
We're
it's hard.
Yeah. So there's all of these things, and we really like gathered that knowledge just by having as many conversations as we could with people that would talk to us. And eventually those first people that invested in us, a lot of them knew us and were mentors
Mhm.
and other successful entrepreneurs. And we were just, it was kind of like we weren't even in market yet.
Yeah.
We were still in that prototype stage, but they believed in us and what we were capable of and were willing to invest in us. So you never know who's going to be an investor. That's what I would say is like,
Yeah.
you kind of have to ask everyone.
Yeah, and it almost sounds like you weren't even technically asking. You were just more or less like, we're at this stage and we're trying to figure out what the next steps looks like. Here's what our business is. Here's what our model is. Here's our success that we've had thus far. We're trying to get to this stage next. Like, what do you recommend? And then they were like, you guys seem to really have it together. Like, let me give you some money.
Yeah, literally that. And it was kind of like, once you get that like one check in, it's kind of like ammunition to
Yeah.
keep going. And then asking them like, hey, can you give me introductions? Like the power of asking. Oh my gosh, we have made so many audacious asks where we're like, they're probably going to say no. And then they say yes. We're like, okay, let's keep asking. You really need to just be shameless with your asks from people because people are so much more willing to help than you probably think they are. So that's really how it started. And then the more we got those opportunities to pitch and talk to people, the more refined our pitch got. And we just
Yeah.
got better at getting in that room. And then we had that confidence to reach out to more sophisticated investors and do
Mm.
proper pitches and all of that. So
What's it like having so many stakeholders? Like, I can't, I feel like it's hard to conceptualize for me because I've never done it before. And like, I've had bosses, obviously, but it's different when the stakes are yours and they're high and you have to report and you have to like be conscientious that it's not just your money anymore. It's somebody else's that you have to think about how that impacts them.
yeah. Yeah. It's such a good question. Especially when you're taking money for like some of our investors were some family members, some like friends of friends, like people who are in our circles and know
Yeah.
us. I think the biggest thing to always be aware of and to talk about with your investors even before they give that check over to you is like, this is a risky investment.
Mm.
Like, I'm going to do everything in my power to like make this a success. And I'm making this into, $100 million, $50 million company. But at the end of the day, the investor needs to know that it's a risky investment and be okay to not get the money back. So
Yeah.
it's a symbiotic relationship because the investor is giving you money because they believe in you. And as the founders, like we are going to do everything we can to ensure that the company is successful.
Right.
But at least for Danny and I, we don't feel like we're like reporting
Mm.
to our investors. They really believe in us and support us. And when we ask for it, will give us the advice and guidance that we need, but there isn't very much like, okay, what are you guys doing? Like, tell us
Yeah.
how you, they really do trust and believe in us. And we don't feel like we're like managed by people. I think
Yeah.
we aren't like a part, none of our money that we've raised, it has been from VCs. I think when
Mhm.
you're with a VC firm, it's different.
Yeah. And I think also maybe the approach that you take where you proactively communicate, you reach out with any questions that you have, you explain the current situation that you're in because you're asking for advice. I think that that
Yeah,
maybe also is like a quasi form of reporting where you're letting them know what the status is and then you're like asking for advice, which I think probably makes them feel more comfortable.
yeah,
I yeah, I think that makes sense. Like if you're working with a firm, that's like a whole business, so, and they probably have their own business stuff that goes on behind the scenes where they're like, looking at dashboards and charts and numbers and
a hundred
things like that
percent.
that require whatever person is managing that account to be aware of, and then because they're reporting to their own stakeholders, and
For
it's a
sure.
whole thing
Yeah,
as
like
opposed to just
these VCs are managing these huge funds and they have their own people to report to. For us, the biggest thing that we've learned is to just keep our investors informed and like excited, because
yeah,
ultimately we want them to be like excited and engaged in our business. Like we want them to like continue to believe in us and be excited
yeah,
about it. Is we send them like a monthly recap
okay, yeah, that was gonna be
email. So yeah, we'll do like, we'll highlight like all the big things that are happening. We'll send like a high level summary of like our sales and expenses and all of that, and are always open to like asking and answering any questions they have based on the things they do. But that monthly touch point is nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That's the route I would have gone, is
Yeah.
like, some sort of a recurring update that's just sort of like, here's what we're doing, this went well or this didn't go well. Here's what's coming next month. Look forward to chatting soon.
Yeah. Like, and I think as we've gotten into this, like initially when we were working with our investors, you know, you're like, oh my God, I have other people's money. I have to be so careful. And, there were a few, like anything, mistakes happen. Like
Yeah.
I remember, you know, we had like an influencer campaign, and one of the influencers that we like signed agreements with, like did all of the crossed our T's, dotted our I's, she just ghosted us and we like
Oh,
paid her
yeah.
50% up front. Like these things happen in business.
Yeah.
But like initially when they happened, I would like freak out and pull my hair out about it and be like, oh my God, like I just wasted that money. Like, but there's lessons there, and your investors know that, and they
Yeah.
they'll support you through all of those lessons as long as they're not, emptying the bank account or whatever,
Yeah.
being
Well, I
irresponsible.
also think it's almost like you should see them investing in you not as something that you then take on as like a quote unquote risk. It is, but like if you were to reframe the mindset and see it as more of a vote of confidence in what you're able to do as a founder, then I think maybe that absolves some of the anxiety around potentially making mistakes, because you're like, they believe in me, like they think that I can do this, so therefore I can do this, and if I make a mistake, then I'm just going to be upfront and honest about it and be like, here's what I learned, we're going to try again next time. And any sort of entrepreneurial venture is, if you're in an entrepreneurial community, like, we're risk takers by nature,
You have
and
to
I
be.
think we prioritize that kind of attitude as opposed to the alternative, which is like not even trying because it's risk adverse. I think like if you try something and it doesn't work out, we're always just sort of like, okay, why? And then, make a different decision from there.
100%. You're like one step closer to cracking the code. Is like you
Yeah.
have to keep trying and iterating. And yeah, I really like that reframe for sure, of like that investor being on your cap table in your corner is a vote of confidence. They believe
Yeah.
in you and what you're capable of and know you'll figure it out.
So when you think about like goal setting or high level thinking about where you want the business to go, like you have this dream, you know what end goal looks like, but each individual step to get from A to Z is a chess game. Like you're thinking about which pieces to move now and later and how to get to where you want to go. And so I imagine that this round, when you last came to SF in terms of like meeting with investors, was like you had a goal in mind, like why you needed that to then scale to the next level. And I'd love for you to talk about how you got to those thought processes and like how you decided on what goals to pursue and when.
Yeah. Goal setting is such like it's been like a lifelong experience for me. Like even in my early 20s, I used to be like a professional dancer. So
Cool.
was like very, always been a very like disciplined person.
Yeah.
Like always knew that like I had to work really hard to achieve whatever I wanted to do. And
Yeah.
dance kind of taught me that from a young age. You don't just like get it good at something overnight. Like it takes a lot of time.
Right. Totally.
So I've always been, and in my 20s, I had a couple of jobs where I like learned how to set goals properly and got
Mm.
very into like the SMART goals with like, it's so, you've got your 30-day, 1 year, 5 year, 10-year goals, and they're just like super clear and specific.
Yeah.
And then like over the last 4 or 5 years, I've just kind of I've thrown all of that into the garbage. I'm like, that's stressful. I have to do what by certain specific date? Like, my gosh, what am I trying to
Yeah.
do to myself?
Yep.
So I think for me, the biggest thing I've learned with just getting from X to Y to Z, like those milestones, whatever you want to call it, is it's more of like a mindset shift, which we
Mm.
even talked about back when like you go from like launch to like scale and you're like building a team and you're managing a team. It's less about like I'm trying to get to the 50 million or the 100 million or whatever the big audacious goal is, and it's more of like, who do I need to become as a person
Mm.
to be able to handle this next phase of growth?
Interesting.
So a lot of what I've learned, and I think why my co-founder and I have been able to like scale so quickly with our company, has a lot to do with our personal growth.
Mm.
And I feel this is still one of those things that also isn't talked about enough. Like my co-founder and I, we both have coaches
Mm.
and are constantly dealing with our own stuff. Like
Yeah.
what are those things? What are those inner beliefs that are holding me back from going for it? Because I feel a lot of people, when you talk about goals and all of that stuff, they'll get lost in like the hows and the strategies and, oh, like I did this and I did that. And it's going to be completely different for any type of business. And you kind of, at some point, eventually, this sounds like a little like woo, but you have to let go of the how,
Yeah.
because you have to believe that and understand the type of person that you need to become that's going to be able to handle um, whatever comes next.
Yeah. I actually think this makes a lot of sense, and you're kind of blowing my mind right now because I never thought about it that way, but it makes perfect sense because it's like I think the reason that we become so attached to the how is because we aren't in that moment yet, right? Like that's the future
Mhm.
for us. And so we want to try to control the present in a way that lines up with that potential future goal. But the issue is that it's not here yet. And in order to get there, right, like everyone's logic is always like, well, in order to get to there, I have to start today and I have to like work backwards,
Yeah.
which in theory makes sense. On paper, it makes perfect sense. However, the issue becomes like in the intense narrowing of that process, you then create like a rigid mindset where you're like, this is
Yeah.
the only path forward.
Yes.
And any alternative is a deviation as opposed to a potential alternate route, which might even get you there faster. And like, it's such a metaphor for life because I was exactly like you. I had my 5 year plan, I had my 10-year plan, and obviously, like, shit didn't go the way that I had planned it. Like simply
Yeah.
things did not go according to plan at all. And when that would happen, I would feel like such a failure. I would have like an
Mhm.
identity crisis and I would be like, what's wrong with me? I'm not good enough. And then that would lead to like a whole other spiral when I realized that I just needed to be someone who's proud of myself today by doing the things that feel good and feel correct and like are mentally stimulating and challenging for sure. But by simply just like rolling it back and be like, these are the things that make me proud every single day, those eventually compound into the place that I need to be and the person that I need to be. And it's like when I stopped worrying about where I was going and started worrying more about like who I am, that I feel like gave me the confidence to trust that I'll get where I need to go. Because like making decisions that are right for you in the moment will never lead you to a bad situation, if that makes sense.
You nailed it. Like the biggest thing from that is like we are so hard on ourselves and have
Yeah.
these like ideals and expectations of how we think things should go.
Yes.
And if you're like so focused on the how, like you said, you're really only open to this like direction, this one direction or way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, there's like infinite ways that things
Yes.
can happen. And if you're not open to those things, you might close doors or not be aware of things. So I feel like you hit it so well when it's like really really being in tune with yourself and like following the breadcrumbs. Like it
Yeah.
sounds so silly, but like what are those things that excite you? Like when you
Yeah.
have a conversation with somebody, what's that thing that like gives you goosebumps? And
Yes.
or who's that person that comes to mind when you're having a conversation, like reach out to them immediately. Like that's like a
Yes.
sign in the right direction. Like those like
Yes.
little nudges and like subtle cues, if you were like so lost in your head and are only focused on this like one way of doing things, you're gonna miss those things.
Yeah. It's why I got so excited when you were like, I've been dealing with my shit, and that's what got me to get to where I am. Because it's like, that is truly the most important step one is it's like, you've got to get yourself together because you are the core and the foundation of your business. You are what drives it forward. And if it's not you, it's going to be somebody else. And if you want to keep going with your brainchild, which like any entrepreneur will say, hell yes,
Yes,
then you have to be in such a good place, like emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially, like all the things have to be right because then
yeah,
that's how you are able to scale. And like, I never thought about it that way. Like, that's how goals happen, is it's just like you getting excited about the next evolution and I don't need to worry about it right now because like I'll feel it when it comes.
absolutely. You need to evolve with your business.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the main reason why we see founders get let go or like they lose that position in their company is something along the way. Like they lost their fire and their like passion to evolve with the business.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of founders that want to get the company to a certain point and then are like, I'm good. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't need to see this to the end. And then there's a lot that want to, see it all the way through. But I really am a big believer that your business only grows as you grow as a person. And the growth is the inner work. Like
Yeah.
it's like you said, it's showing up as your best self, but then also having the resilience to get through like the mud and the really hard times. And that only comes with like constantly working on yourself.
Yeah. And is that what did you learn all this through like your life coach? Is this just like business that has taught you this? Like, how did you get to this place?
Yeah, I would say like when I started Mave and Chez, I think a lot of people have a similar experience. Like pandemic 2020, like really rocked all of us to our core,
Yeah.
especially in Canada. Like the States was a little lax, but we were like still in the pandemic till like mid 2022. It was like a good 2.5 years of just like
Damn.
indoors, not normal life, like all of the things. And I did a lot of self-reflection. I kind of like felt like I like came out of a trance, and
Yeah.
I was like, I want to like I want to be better. I want to figure out how to be the best. There's nothing wrong with me,
Yeah.
right? Like, like I was still a great person and doing great things, but I really truly didn't know myself,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah, investing in a coach, um, having a really good morning routine. I've gotten up at 6 a.m. for the last 4 years, like 80% of the time.
I
Like
was
most
just
of the time.
saying,
Not all the time, but like I get up at 6 a.m.
yeah.
I'm the first 2 hours of my day focused on my personal growth,
Mhm.
coaching, meditating, all of the things, and it compounds. Like
Yeah.
I have really hard weeks where I'm like, oh my God, I have to sit here and meditate for 10 minutes. I don't want to do it. But over time, all of these like little micro things that you do in your
Yes.
day make an impact.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think I had a very similar story I can relate. Like, it happened for me also during the pandemic. I was actually happened to live in China at the time, so I got stuck there for two
Wow.
years, which was wild. That was a crazy
Oh,
experience.
where in China were you?
I was living in Macau. I was working over there,
Oh,
and
goodness.
yeah, so it's this very small island, very close to
Yeah.
Hong Kong. And when the borders closed, it seemed okay because we're such a small island. Like they shut the border so nobody could come in and out, but that meant that we could like still go to the office and like go out to restaurants, but there was no ability to travel, and work was working, but eventually it slowed down and all of our projects got postponed and put on hold indefinitely. And so basically, like, I was just chained to a desk all day with literally nothing to do. And by that point in time, like, the US was starting to open back up, so people were traveling again, and we were still stuck. And I mean, just in those 2 years, I also met my best friend, and he's really like all about this. And I think he was the one who really taught me um, that I didn't have all my shit together. Like, I was definitely the person that thought that I had it all together and all figured out, when in reality, it's exactly as you said, I didn't know myself at all. I had ignored so much of who I was for such a long time, and then like created like a false persona on top of that as a projection. And to then like spend time really being confronted with that, breaking it down, and then rebuilding from a place of honesty and truth, was like my 2 year project. And I was the same as you. It really, like, it isn't just about talking to somebody every day. It's not like about that experience. It's more about the work that you put in to support that. It's like, I meditating, journaling was a huge one for me. Like, that was the one place that I could not hide from myself, and I had to really be truthful and honest. And so it was like, that was my big way, and like that one I had to do every day, even on especially on the days when I didn't want to. Actually, like, if I didn't want to journal, that meant I had something to talk about and I had to sit down and deal with it. And then meditating was super helpful. And then it compounds until you get to a point when you're like, I've got it. And then like those things are just there to support you. But in the early stages of rebuilding, like, those are the most key things that like you cannot skip out on.
Essential. Also crazy. I also lived in China many, many moons ago, but I lived in like Hangzhou, China. I taught English for a year, so
What?
I can't imagine what it was like during the pandemic.
It was wild.
Yeah, I'm sure. I
It
would
was
also
a
do
weird
a
time.
lot of inner work as well too. Wow.
That's what a weird coincidence.
Yeah, crazy. Um, yeah, you know, it's so much when you start to do the work on yourself, you realize how much of like other people's beliefs and like
Mm,
society's viewpoints you've wrapped up in your identity, which you actually don't agree with, but you
yeah.
just absorbed it. And, especially as women, we're so much more prone to being people pleasers and
Yeah.
just trying to be polite and do things to please others over
Yeah.
ourselves. And like, that's something I honestly still catch myself.
Yeah,
Like, my
totally.
self-awareness will be like, that's old Victoria. Like, she,
Yes.
like, and it's like this constant process of just really being aware of like these old versions of yourself. They're still in there, and sometimes they'll come out. And having that awareness to be like, that's not me, but like these are the versions of me that are I'm still trying to shed.
Yeah, it's a consistent practice that you have to put in place every day, but I think it just gets easier to deal with. Like in the beginning, it
Yeah.
feels like hard and
Yeah.
like this huge big thing that's like, oh my God, I'm gonna tell this person I don't want to have dinner with them. And it's like, I don't want to do it. And then
Yeah.
now you're just like, honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you, like, I can't do that tonight. Like my mindset is not in the place that where I can have dinner. Like maybe let's try. Can we go do next week? Like I'm just not vibing,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like
They're
you still
usually like,
practice.
okay. And you're
Yeah,
like, oh.
yeah, exactly. And you're like, it's still a practice because deep down inside, I'm still like, I don't want to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But when you do it, it just gets easier, and then all of those little things compound to give you the confidence to continue to follow the right path.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's catching yourself, right? It's
Mhm.
like, or, sometimes we like fumble and we'll say yes and be like, you know what, actually, I'm really like need a night in. I'm not feeling so well, or, my
Yeah.
battery's drained. Like those moments of just acknowledging yourself. And you'll feel so much better when you stand up for yourself and say what you actually want and take care of your own needs.
Oh yeah, I'll never forget it was like the last time that I said to myself that I would ever discount or like disrespect myself in that way by not doing what I needed to do because I was worried about hurting someone else's feelings. Like there was always that one last time where you're like really disappointed in yourself. You're like, I can't believe I did that again. And you're like, it's never gonna happen again. And then, from there you're like, I know now what that feels like and I don't want to go through that again. So I'm
Yeah.
just gonna do the right thing now and not put myself back in a situation where I have to be like, what was I thinking?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's great.
Well, I think that that's like the perfect mic drop for this episode. I, I honestly,
We
I feel like we
covered a
touched
lot.
every, we ran the whole gambit, I think.
We went all the way from the outside all the way in. So
Yeah.
I hope everyone that's listening really feels like their cups are full and that, you know, um, there's not this like proven way to do things. Yes, like with my course, there's a lot of like these basic things that you can learn and acquire. And my goal always is to empower and support others just to make like a few little less mistakes than myself. But
Yeah.
ultimately, like the power is in you. And no one is going to build a business like you will. And we
Hmm.
all have such like a unique and beautiful gift to give this to this world. And that's why I love meeting other entrepreneurs, and like that's why I'm surrounded by all of them, because we've all kind of figured that out and
Yeah.
willing to take the biggest, the most biggest and most rewarding risk, which is on ourselves. So
Yeah. That's so beautiful. My cup is full. I feel great. I feel very energized.
beautiful. Job mission complete.